Hello and welcome to Heroes and Patriots. Heroes and Patriots highlights issues concerning national security, intelligence, and foreign policy. Today is Thursday, July 30th, 2026, and we are streaming live from the studios of KMUD Community Radio in Northern California. I'm Mary Massey, and with me is John SAKOWICZ, co-host, joining us from Florida. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Mary, and good morning to our broadcast audience here in Northern California and to our national audience listening to the web stream. Just three quick housekeeping items. First, I want to thank all the listeners and all my Facebook friends who were able to contribute to KMUD through my birthday fundraiser for KMUD. So I think we raised a little bit of money, and I hope the station got it. I don't know what the mechanism is for that. Second thing is, I'm very excited about our guest today, a very important and dynamic thinker, thought leader in the Native American community. And I want to point out that here in our listening area, we have several tribes, not just the Pomo, but the Kurok, the Hupa, the Tolowa, the Wiak, the Yurok, the Miwok. We have these tribes and more Native Americans listening in our broadcast area. And finally, I want to point out that our guest next week will be Leon Panetta. We're very happy to have him. Former Secretary of State under the Clinton administration, former director of the CIA, former budget director, longtime member of Congress. His son is now taken over his seat in Congress, a progressive Democrat. And I reached out to the Clintons, Bill and Hillary Clinton, to their people, and I've invited them to listen and to call in, and perhaps they will. Leon Panetta is now leading the Panetta Institute, and even into his 80s, he's got a lot to say.
Right. Great. Well, we're going to get started. We invite you as listeners to call in with your comments or questions. The number to call, 707-923-3911. Rob is our engineer this morning. He can take your call and then add you into the conversation. If you don't want to be on the air, please leave your question with Rob, and we'll do our best to add it into the program. Today we speak with returning guest DINA GILIO-WHITAKER. Ms. Whitaker is the Assistant Director of California Indian Cultural and Sovereignty Center in San Marcos, California State University, San Marcos. Her latest book, Who Gets to Be Indian? Ethnic Fraud and Other Difficult Conversations About Native American Identity, which was released last fall in 2025. She is the co-editor of Cambridge University Press Element Series, Elements in Indigenous Environmental Research. And this past July 4th, she wrote a terrific article, America 250 and the Democratic Contradiction. So let's bring in Dina. Dina, welcome to the program again.
Hi, Mary and John. Great to be with you again. Appreciate the invitation.
Sure. Was all that accurate, I hope?
Yeah.
Good.
Little thumbnail, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we want to spend some time with you talking about this article and other related issues. And the thing that stuck out to me about your entire article is the word consent. That democracy only seems to be in place to be genuine with consent from all parties. Do you want to start with your article and let us know some of the highlights, and so we can begin with the conversation?
Yeah. So this is the political scientist in me. I don't claim to be a political scientist, but I did study it in college and have always been pretty much of a politics junkie. And so I think about thinking about what the concept of democracy means in the United States. The United States is founded on these, lofty principles of freedom and justice for all, liberty and all of that. But and the United States is a young country, right? 250 years. If we think about the longue durée, the historical arc of the concept of sovereignty in globally, we really trace it back to, most scholars will say 1648
Right.
with the Treaty of Westphalia. So we talk about the Westphalian state and this idea of sovereignty becoming associated with territorial boundaries and not with monarchies and kings. And so from there, we start to see the formation of the principles of modern democracies with people like Thomas Hobbes and John Locke,
Right.
and this idea of what democracy means, and at the core of that is this idea of consent, that the legitimacy of a democracy inheres in the consent of the governed. And so from that, we get ideas like the social contract in the United States, which holds that people, implicitly agree to give up some of their rights in order to receive the protection and the benefits of the state. And so that's sort of given political theory in the United States. And my argument is that in terms of consent, when it comes to American Indians, the theory doesn't hold up, because American Indians are really the only group of people in the U.S. who have had this political system thrust on them without their express consent. That's what it means to be colonized, what it means to be the original inhabitants living on land and then having, the processes of foreign invasion, of colonialism coming in and imposing itself on top of your lands, on top of your own governance systems. And so we see hundreds of years of treaties, hundreds of treaties as well, that have been made with tribes that were over time increasingly coerced. And those treaties were not about extracting consent to be governed by the United States. They were something else. They were about creating agreements, and based on the idea of the recognition of mutual sovereignty. Well, over time, that recognition gets eroded, and Native people are having these systems, the American system, thrust on them in some pretty violent ways. So this is what I think is that it's the, as Felix Cohen, the noted legal scholar, wrote so clearly in the 40s and 50s about the miner's canary. He said that Indians were the miner's canary of America's democratic faith. And so that's some really, what's interesting to me is that hasn't really been commented on much in terms of Native studies or even other areas of political theory.
And
Mary, let me jump in here, because I'm looking at that quote right now, and that was going to be my first question, because it's actually horrifying. That quote is horrifying. As our listeners know, I'm a direct descendant of Kazimierz Sakowicz, who was the first journalist to document the mass murder of Jews in World War II. And this quote just went straight through my heart. And the quote is this. In 1953, Felix Cohen wrote, "Like a miner's canary, the Indian marks the shift from fresh air to poison gas in our political atmosphere and our treatment of the Indians, even more than our treatment of other minorities, and reflects the rise and fall of our democratic faith." He added that there was a specific moment in time of the regressively brutal federal Indian policy of termination, and he compared the experience of American Indians to that of Jews in Nazi Germany. Wow, wow, and wow. Are those, is that an overstatement, Dina, or did he nail it?
I don't think it's an overstatement at all. I think that he knew what he was talking about, and he was a Jew himself, and so I think it really hit home for him, at post Holocaust, and so I think he had a pretty exceptionally clear view of it, and he was a specialist in federal Indian law. I mean, he wrote one of the most respected, kind of like the Bible of federal Indian law, called I think it was called the Handbook of Federal Indian Law, and so to this day, it's a major part of the canon of federal Indian legal documents and literature. So I don't think it's an overstatement at all. In fact, what's shocking to me is that it hasn't gotten more attention than it has over all this time. So I'm outraged about that. As a scholar, as somebody who, as a Native person who has been aware of this for decades myself, and when we here at this moment, when we talk about celebrating 250 years of American independence and democracy, like there's the cover up. It's like a cover up that is continually maintained, and like we were talking about earlier, there was so little perspective granted toward Native people in these very public conversations. Who was talking to Native people about what is 250 years of American independence mean to you?
Right, exactly. And I was going to come back to how I'm speaking to you from Palm Beach, Florida, Trump country, by the way. Mar-a-Lago is right down the street. I wanted to talk to you about how we commemorated the 250th July 4th here, and then I was going to ask you about your July 4th. But before I get there, and Mary, if you'll just allow me to pursue this line of questioning for a moment.
Sure.
I'm following up on Indian law scholar Felix Cohen's remark, and it would seem to me that a lot of his argument turns on the Indian Child Welfare Act and the two Supreme Court cases in 2013 and 2022 that kind of define and then redefine those rights. So the rights of Indian children goes to the rights of all people in our so-called democracy, or not. Could you elaborate a little, Dina, if you please, on how the Indian Child Welfare Act is kind of a window into the whole issue?
Yeah, that's a really great point, and it's a great entry point to talking about all of this. So let's back up and for our listeners and talk about what the Indian Child Welfare Act is. It was a law that was passed in 1978, and the purpose of it was to stop what had been happening for decades in this country, which was the systematic taking of Native children from Native families. And of course, the trajectory of that is that it begins in the 19th century with the boarding schools under the mandate of the Dawes Act and the policy of forced assimilation. So the federal government was actively breaking up families in these different ways by sending children to boarding schools, especially. And then that policy gets repudiated in the 1930s with the passage of the Indian Reorganization Act. But the dynamic still continues of breaking up Native families and the federal government's need to handle the Indian problem, something that it had always talked about in those terms. And so we start to see the adoption industry taking over, and native. So there's like this sort of blending in of, the breaking up of native families through sending kids to boarding schools, and now they are being removed systematically from native families through adoption based on this white man's burden sort of imperative. It's still about the need to rescue Indians from their savage cultures. It was so widespread that there is no native family in this country who was not impacted by it, including my own family. My mother had a child taken from her, her oldest firstborn child, and then there were two children it broke her to the point where she had to she gave up two more children before I was born. I was her firstborn with my father, and then there were two other children. Long story short, but the policy was so detrimental to Indian country. A study found that in the early 1970s that 25 to 35% of all Native children had been removed from their families. Thus, the need. Congress actually recognized the need for this law. So the law gets passed in 1978, and it's to this day seen as the gold standard in the adoption industry for protecting the rights of Native people and tribes. It gives tribes the authority to intervene in Indian adoptions in order to keep children in their families when possible, in their tribal communities when possible. But it's very controversial in the adoption field, which is very typically politically conservative, very dominated by religious interests. And so there has been a long-term effort to undermine or overturn that law. And there are a lot of ways that we can talk about this. Like, why would they want to do that? But there have been two Supreme Court cases that have come out of this attack, this right-wing directed attack on tribal sovereignty, because that's what this is. This law is considered one of the most, if not the most powerful law that protects tribal sovereignty, that's under attack. Now we've had two cases in the Supreme Court that have not actually overturned the law yet, but the last one, which was decided in 2023, that was the Brackeen case, was issued some very troubling opinions, notably by Justice Kavanaugh, that leaves the door open for further challenges and the potential to undermine and or overturn this law.
Yeah, for our legal scholars out there, that 2022-2023 Supreme Court case that our guest is referring to is the Bracken versus Haaland, Haaland case. And it's very disturbing because it doesn't just talk about the child adoption statutes, but also about probate statutes, as probate affects Native Americans, and something known as the commandeering or anti-commandeering doctrine. Do you want to go into that at all, Dina?
No, I'm not. I'm not a legal scholar, and so that's a little bit outside my realm of comfort. I did write about it in my last book, though, so I would defer to that, and then there's plenty of legal opinions that have been written about that.
Yeah, it's pretty scary. I'll just sum it up. The anti-commandeering doctrine says that the federal government cannot enlist state officials to enforce federal laws, but there's enough gray area in this Supreme Court decision to allow other challenges to that. So, as you pointed out a minute ago, this decision has got a lot of loopholes, and it's going to have to be aspects of this decision will have to be heard by the Supreme Court again, I'm sure. Mary?
Yeah, and
Yeah,
it's
go ahead,
Oh, I
Dina.
was just going to say it's still wide open. This is nowhere near over. The effort to overturn and to undermine tribal sovereignty as a legal principle is very well funded, uh, especially by the Goldwater Institute, and it's notable that in that case. It was a wealthy white couple that was defending their rights to adopt a Navajo child. And they were a wealthy couple, and their case was argued pro bono by one of the leading big law firms in the country. So they are very motivated to push these kinds of cases through. And, we're talking about Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher. They're a very problematic big law firm that has been on the front lines of working against Indian country for years.
Yeah, going to the dissenting opinion from the court's decision, and I quote, "The court's decision could have revolutionary, catastrophic consequences. There are hundreds of treaties with Indian nations that are still in effect, and if you can't treat Indian nations as sovereigns, if you can't treat Indians differently from non-Indians, doesn't that make all those treaties constitutional?" Wow.
It is 22 minutes past the hour. You're listening to Heroes and Patriots. If you're just tuning in, John Sakowicz and I, Mary Massey, are speaking with Dina Giglio-Whitaker about her latest article, America 250 and the Democratic Contradiction. If you'd like to, if you have a comment or a question, the number to call, 707-923-3911. Dina, I'm curious to know what Native populations around the country, how you plug in with them and help absorb their reactions and responses, and what has been the response in general to your most recent writings?
Well, I think I actually wrote that piece and published it. I just published it on my Substack and then on my Facebook page. I haven't found it. I haven't even tried to find a mainstream outlet to publish it. But I will say that it's the seed for a book. It's a book that I've been working on for a long time, and it's undergone a series of evolutions because of the changing winds politically of this country in the last 10 years. I mean, so much has changed, and so much of my thinking is continually being updated because of where we find ourselves in this moment of really what's I think of as an authoritarian takeover with this current administration. But so I'm thinking about why is it that we don't talk about American democracy when it comes to American Indians through this lens of the lack of consent. But to answer your question, so there's really I haven't seen anybody write about it from this perspective, which is kind of mind blowing to me. But so I've done some interviews. I did 4 interviews, 4 podcasts, none of them mainstream, except for this one mainstream Australian show that evidently Australia was interested in America 250. They were, I think probably much of the world was watching it, probably with horror, considering where we're at in this country. And I think the rest of the world is looking at the U.S. and wondering what the hell is going on over there. But anyway, so
That's going to be a question we have of Leon Panetta next week.
yeah, that's amazing.
We have a phone call, Dina, if we could hold that thought, and let's put that caller on the air. Caller, if you're listening, go ahead with your question or comment for Dina Giglio-Whitaker.
Okay, well, I'm on. Thank you so much for this program. It's so late in coming this realization of where we are at this time in this nation relative to our Native American brothers and sisters. Thank you so much for this program. I think that 250 years is a little soon to declare victory for democracy. I think we need to give it a few more years. And I'm hoping to see that. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome, and thank you for calling in with those comments. Dina, do you have any thoughts on that? It's not over yet.
Right. I'm shaking my head vigorously, yes. And that was kind of what I was pointing to earlier about democracy as we know it, right? In the context of the Westphalian state, it is very early. This, we often talk about the U.S. as the experiment, the American experiment, and I think there's probably a lot of truth to that. The contradiction, of course, is about, how do you call yourself a democracy when you are founded on violence of the most profound kind, and the lack of consent of those that you imposed yourself on top of, and it is still. I think it's still too early to see how that's going to turn out, and it's as evidenced by where we're at right now with the authoritarianism that we're facing. Dare I say, fascism? I wouldn't be the first person to say it, but it's I think we got a long ways to go, and if Native Americans truly are the miner's canary, then we'll need to see how Native people fare through this over the next, we'll see how we are in a century, and we'll have another conversation. Hopefully.
I was looking at something online, and we have a local college here, Mendocino College, which is offering native language courses, and it just struck me that here's a population that's been in this area before we got here, and they actually need courses to, instill and the culture and so forth to keep that alive here in for the very people that were here before us. I was just struck by that, and that's just sort of an aside.
Yeah, shout out to my friend Lori Lewa Thomas, who teaches there. Pomo, respected Pomo scholar.
Right. John, do you have a thought?
Yeah, well, a quick thought. As some of our listeners know, I'm a poet, and I recently applied for a residency, poet in resident position at the Amy Clampett House in central Massachusetts. And my project is to continue to help and to fund the revitalization of the North Pomo language, and to translate, to use AI as a translation tool, like you have. You can use your cell phone now to go from English to Italian or something like this. As a tourist, we're developing AI as well to revitalize Native American languages so that younger generations will find it easier to learn. Now, that's just a quick comment. The bigger comment I have, and it's apropos to what we were talking about, the founding principles that this country was founded on. The poet, Pulitzer Prize-winning poet, and watershed environmentalist Gary Snyder is, I won't say we're friends, but we're friendly. He's in his 90s now. He once remarked that, and he's a Buddhist, mind you. So he believes in things like karma. He says that the United States will come to no good. The United States will come to a catastrophic end because of its karma. And its karma is simple. This karma is simple to understand. This country was founded on the extermination of Native American populations, the theft of their lands, and then we transitioned to slavery.
Mm.
So what end could the United States come to except through its karma? It can only come to a catastrophic, terrible end. Dina, what say you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a Buddhist, but and I'm not sure about karma. I don't know if that's real or not, but it certainly doesn't bode well. I mean, for a country that again espouses the lofty ideals of freedom and democracy and liberty and justice and all of that. Um, but I would say that there's something to consider here is that it wasn't that linear, right? That it was extermination and then slavery. All of these
Right,
things existed coterminously, simultaneously,
right.
and for Native people, it was both, right? It was
Yes,
extermination and slavery.
absolutely,
Uh,
absolutely. The
so
one of the things to point out is that one of the last places children were bought and sold as property was right here in Northern California, in Mendocino County. Picking hops is a terrible job because hops grow on vines that go up to 10 feet tall. And they have these the very sticky, prickly husk to them. And there's also a dust that creates asthma. So you have all this skin irritation and you have this dust that causes asthma, and you're harvesting these hops 10 feet high on ladders. The only people they could get to do it were Pomo children. And these Pomo children were bought and sold as slaves as recently as the 1900s, right here in Northern
right.
California.
Right, but of course it wasn't, they didn't use that word, right? It
No,
was
they didn't.
under the language of a law called some innocuous sounding title, a law for the protection and care of the Native Americans or something like that, which essentially legalized indentured servitude.
Right.
And yeah, you're right. It lasted well into the late 19th century, and maybe early 20th century. But the idea, of course, in California, in the scholarship in what we call genocide studies, there's a lingering debate about, was the United States actually genocidal? Did it commit genocide against Native people? And there are arguments that some say it was, some say it wasn't. But in the case of California, it's
Yes.
pretty clear that was the case. There does seem to be agreement about that, and because of intent. So if we talk about what genocide is, it rests on this idea of there must be intent on the part of a government. Well, it was clearly stated in the case of California, of course, in 1851, with the State of the State address of the first governor, Peter Burnett. So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
um,
I actually, in my application for the poet in residence at the Amy Clampett House, I actually quote the governor's State of the Union address, State of the State address. He is very explicit
very,
about budgeting a couple of $1 million for the extermination of Native American people. There's no question, there's no ambiguity about it. It's black and white. And in the years that followed, the Native American population in Northern California alone went from about 200,000 to less than 30,000. And bounty hunters were paid to kill
yeah.
men, women, and children. Men, women, and children. This is explicit. This is an explicit part of California history. And it goes right back to that State of the State address in, 1851, did you say, Dina?
Yep.
Yep.
It is 35 minutes past the hour. If you're just tuning in, we're talking about an article written by Dina Whitaker, America 250, and the Democratic Contradiction. If you'd like to call in with a question or comment, 707-923-3911. John, perhaps Gary Snyder's notion of karma is already underway here, even as we speak here in 2026. As I was listening to this, I was thinking of all the different cultures and races and people represented just in the United States, including the natives, and how this administration has packed itself with white, male, fundamental Christians who are against gays, are against women, and are almost trying to homogenize and do away with people that think and act and believe their religions are different. I mean, I think about the Jews, I think about the Muslims, I think about the Catholics. They don't fit into that model.
Mary, it's even scarier than that because they're not just, Trump isn't just packing government. It's more frightening that he's packing the military.
Well, yeah, Hegseth
with Christian nationalists,
nationalists.
And he's purging the military of everyone else.
Exactly. And so I think this is kind of karma, going back to Gary's ideas. And, you know, I don't think people are realizing this. They react and this, that, and the other. Oh, Trump this, oh, Trump that. But this is a real phenomenon. White national male Christians are swooping in and trying to remove a variety of religions and cultures and languages. And you're different from me, you're out. You know, we're just going to get rid of you. And that's my soapbox coming away from this, is that we are in serious trouble. It looks like we have a call from Rob. Rob, go ahead and put our listener on the air. Go ahead, caller.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, I would like to comment about what you guys are talking right now. And,
okay.
First of all, I'm a resident. I'm from Mexico. And I would just like to say that I totally agree with the guy's point of view. This country has a huge karma. And it's up to mostly white people to understand where they came from, that they came here almost 200 years after the Spaniards came. And what they did here and what they've been perpetuating for the last 250 years is an abomination. It's 100% racist, and it needs to end. It needs to end. People need to be conscious of all the stuff they have done. And yeah, it is karma, and it will change when things collapse as they are, and then, you know, it might change something for everybody.
Right.
I want to ask the caller, what do you see as the near-term future for the United States, caller?
With Trump?
Yeah, well, for the next 2 years, correct.
Oh, my God. I just don't see much hope, you know, like if this country doesn't apply their 25th Amendment and actually, you know, like everybody has to come together and get this guy out of the presidency. He's just not qualified. He's a sick person, mentally ill. He's a criminal. And I just can't believe that nobody has done anything to remove this guy. So I just don't see much hope and future, not just for the U.S., but for the entire world. Like the things that are happening everywhere, thanks to this administration, you know, are just abhorrent. So that's pretty concerning.
Thank you, caller. You know, I'm also reminded about what's going on between Israel and Gaza and all those surrounding Middle East countries, as how it's almost like the Israelis, I say the government, I don't mean the people, I mean the administration, Netanyahu and his entourage, seem to be wanting to homogenize and remove the Palestinians. It seems like that phenomenon is also happening and has been happening for years. And and do you know what I'm saying?
Oh, definitely. And also, you know, like I'm from Mexico City, We
Right.
have a huge population of Israelis in Mexico, and this is nothing new. You know, it's been for over the same time they had occupied Palestine is the same time they have been in Mexico, and not just in Mexico, all South America. Argentina is
Wow.
packed with them everywhere. They're everywhere,
Right.
and their agenda and what they are seeking is to, like, it sounds like a conspiracy theory, but they want to dominate the world, and the
Right.
U.S. government is helping them.
Right. Well, thank you, caller, for calling in. You've given us a lot to think about, and we're going to see if there's any response from Dina or John. Thank you again for calling in. Dina?
Thank you so much.
You bet.
First of all, I want to say that let's be clear that this did not begin with the English. It began with the Spanish colonization on this continent. The Spanish were the earliest people to arrive and colonize, and they were in the 1600 late 1500s, and then 1600s. They were actively aggressively fighting with the Pueblo people there. Here in California, we see the first incursions in 1769 with the Portola expedition coming up from Mexico or Baja into California and building the mission system. And the mission system was brutal. It brought slavery into this part of the continent, and not to mention European diseases, and wiped out 90% of the indigenous population within the first couple of decades. So there is equal culpability among the European empires. In terms of, so California, when we talk about California history with Native people, three waves of colonization. So it begins with the Spanish, then we have the secularization era when it becomes Mexico. Mexico, fights for its independence from Spain. That lasts a couple of decades. There's harm done during those decades, and then of course, the Americans come in. They defeat Mexico and take over the land. So that's where we're still at. So three waves of colonialism here in California. But as far as the conversation about Israel, I think it's really important to make certain distinctions, that it's really the ideology of Zionism that we're talking about. So it's not a religious conversation. It's not anti-Semitism. It's the ideology of Zionism that is another form. I see it as another form of totalitarianism on the land in the Levant, right? That region of the world, where many cultures have lived for millennia. And so, yes, I do agree that there is an active genocide going on there. It's not new. It's not since 2023. It's been going on since 1948.
Right.
And with the Nakba. And we have to be clear about that too. Furthermore, let's understand the U.S.'s connection to that, and how the U.S. has, along with the British and other European forces, have enabled that. The U.S., of course, has funded it for all these decades, and let's also understand that as another instance of settler colonialism. Israel has learned from the best. It's learned from the U.S. about how to go in and forcibly take land, create an apartheid state, and continue eliminating an indigenous population in order to take their lands. That is exactly what's happening in Israel now.
We have a couple callers. Rob, if you could put the first caller on, we'll take that question. Go ahead, caller, with your question.
Hi, is that me?
Yes, it is. Go ahead. Good
Oh,
morning.
hi. It's good morning. It's me again. Sorry, guys, but I just wanted to make another point. Um,
Okay.
I heard the other person saying about Spain. That's the first thing I said. I said, like, English came 200 or almost 250 years after the Spaniards. I didn't diminish what the Spaniards did. I'm
Right.
Mexican. I have a Spanish last name, but I'm not. What I'm saying and what I want to make a really important point about is that when the Spaniards came, they did atrocities. Of course they did. But in Mexico, we still have our indigenous people. They were not like almost obliterated. They weren't completely taken away from the map. There is 366 languages still spoken in Mexico by
Wow.
the indigenous cultures, just to let you know, guys. We have
Okay.
a lot of communities, a lot of indigenous communities that are still in their ancestral lands. Mayans didn't go anywhere. All that story about Mayans that they disappeared, those are lies. That we have Huicholes, we have Aztecs still, all the Nahuatl people are still in the conurbated area of Mexico City. We have like almost 20 different indigenous peoples in Oaxaca. We have a lot of indigenous people, and they still have their lands. And our new president, she's giving land back to them till this
Oh,
day. So,
yeah.
like, what we know about Spain that was terrible, it was, and I am not a religious person in that sense. I'm not Catholic or anything. But what I'm trying to say is that it was never the level of destruction the English did and the land grab and the genocide they did here, because it was a genocide. And that creates another topic for me. Like, I don't even understand why there would be a discussion about it or people would not agree with that. There was a genocide. When you kill most of the population of a land and you leave a 3% of what it used to be, that's called a genocide.
Right.
And they were segregated to these places where they don't even have resources. They don't have food. That their schools are terrible. Even, I mean, the school system in the U.S. is terrible, regardless. But they are just segregated there. So, yeah, the
Well,
Spanish were bad, but they were not to the level the English were, by far.
yeah. Well, we appreciate you calling us back and filling us in. That's one good thing about this program is we all become more educated. We're going to say goodbye to you and pick up this other call in the interest of time, but thank you for calling in. Rob, if you'll put that other caller on. Caller, go ahead.
Hi, good morning. The wonderful thing about the Buddhist tradition is that it is the present moment is what counts, and the present moment, the now, can change karma. It's not written in cement, and that's very positive. There is an event coming up by the Grassroots Institute in Mendocino. They have invited Arena Wiseman to give a workshop to discuss exactly how it is that we all can become better people in a democracy, and like becoming aware of our what we do is wrong, and to change that, like racism, sexism, etc. And I became aware, for example, this morning that one of the stories I've been telling is really not that positive. And so, anyways, I'm interested in finding out if this program is going to be via Zoom, but you can write to limbird95482@gmail.com and tell them that you're interested in going, and I think that they will give you more direction. So that's limbird95482@gmail.com, and it's through the Grassroots Institute. And let me see if one of the areas this habitual expression takes place is how in privileged locations we are unaware of the ways we build identities which cover our hearts and separate ourselves from others. So it's an effort to go forward. Really, we can't go back. Thank you.
Exactly. And it starts with individuals, which may be how we undo most of this or all of this. Thank you, caller, for calling in. We have another call that we'd like to take in the interest of time. Rob, if you put them on the air, please.
Good morning, and thank you for being heroes and patriots.
Good morning.
You're hearing me clearly, Mary?
We can hear you just fine. Go ahead.
Very good. I'd like to thank you, guest, for taking the time to be with us this morning for a broad-minded and compassionate listening audience. I also like to ask the question about the present assault against First Nation people, especially women, the assault, the abduction, and the abuse of Native American women. I'd like to ask your guests to address the clear and present danger that First Nation people face at the hands of the Gestapo, nicknamed ICE, who aren't very nice. And I'd like to thank your guests and remind your guests that where I live off-grid. I live where the bear lives, and the bear broke into my cabin. I took no malice against the bear. The bear lives, and I am a guest. And I think that more Americans, I'm only third generation American, but all of us in this life are merely guests on this rock hurtling through space. This diatribe that we oppose each other. There's no us, they, them. We are we, and we are stronger when we stand together. We're especially strong when we have free speech, free thought radio. And I thank your guests for appearing. And next week, when you have Mr. Panetta on, please implore him to ask the Clintons with their mighty foundation to throw a whole bunch of money at this necessary asset of culture and community. Thanks for your time. I bid you all peace and good hearts.
Well, we hope you join us next week, and maybe you could ask that question yourselves. Dina, there's a lot to unpack in that last question. Go for it.
Yeah, thanks for that, caller. Yeah, the problem of missing and murdered Indigenous women and peoples in general is an ongoing problem of colonization and the lack of concern. I mean, the reason we could say it's complicated, like the reasons for this, and they're jurisdictional. I think they're psychological, but it's also systemic in terms of there's just not enough interest in even keeping data. Like we don't even have the exact data of who's, how people go missing, how they're tracked, and all of that. So at the most basic level, it's the just systemic injustice. I would really like to see, talking about, we didn't even get to talk about the doctrine of discovery. Like that's a huge topic when we talk about consent and how the doctrine of discovery is at the foundation of this lack of consent. I would love to see you talk to Leon Panetta next week about that. Like, I would like to know, what does he know? Does he even know what that is?
Sure.
Dina, why don't you call into the show?
Yeah, and give us a shout.
We'll give you the VIP line.
Okay. Hey guys, we have one more call because we aren't going to cover that in 3 minutes. So
then I want to thank somebody in our listening audience.
All right. We have another caller, Rob. Let's go ahead and put them on the air, and then we'll wrap up. Caller, go ahead.
Hi, is this me? Is this me?
Go ahead. Good morning.
Hi, is this me, please?
Yes, it's you, caller.
Oh, hi. I just want to acknowledge and say thank you so much to the fellow that just called in talking about the bear.
You're breaking up, I'm afraid.
Okay, I like the caller, the man that called in, said he lives out in the
Maybe she
wild.
could tell you her question, Rob, and you could relay it. Well, while we're waiting to get that, I just want to remind listeners that we are in the middle of a fund drive, and don't forget, if you support KMUD or this particular program, now's the time to call in with your donation, a pledge. You can write in. You can
Absolutely, Mary. Absolutely. Thank you for mentioning that. KMUD is the little engine that could. Our shows go out to the big wide world out there at Heroes and Patriots, but we start here in Redway, California, and we've got a great staff, a great supportive staff. I love everyone at the station. We've even been featured in a.
Yeah, thank you for that. Dina, why don't you?
Wait, Mary, can I just finish 1 second? So
Yes.
I just want to say, we've been featured in a Netflix documentary, Murder Mountain. We are KMUD, we are your community radio station. And if there's one thing we know about grassroots, if there's one thing we know about change, is that all change is grassroots. And if there's one thing we know about grassroots movement, they're all about family, they're all about community. In that regard, I want to thank somebody as well. So as some listeners know, I started my career in Wall Street, and after Goldman Sachs bought out our firm, I had nothing to do with my life. So I decided to become a cop. And I decided to become a cop here in Northern California. And I knew nothing about the history of Pomo people, the history of genocide, the history of crimes against humanity, the human trafficking, the sex trafficking by Kelsey. I knew nothing about that, and a man in my custody, a guy by the name of Frank Whipple, who's now in prison, he's been returned to prison, got me started on my journey, and he was one tough customer. But if there's one thing he taught me is give respect, get respect, and respect starts with knowing who your neighbor is, who your fellow man and woman are. Get to know them and do not judge. So, Frank, wherever you are, thank you, brother.
Dina, final word. How can folks follow you, get in touch with you about your upcoming book, etc.? We got about a minute.
Okay, I have cut back my social media presence. I think social media is mostly toxic, and I don't like. I really hate the whole self-promotion game, even though I know it's kind of necessary if you're a public intellectual and doing public work. But find me on Substack, DINA GILIO-WHITAKER. I'm brand new on there. I'm trying to build a presence, mostly just Facebook. I've kind of don't even do Instagram, but. I can be reached at Dina G. Whitaker at Gmail and at my office at the California Indian Culture and Sovereignty Center at Cal State San Marcos.
Wonderful. Well, we are out of time. Just as note again, join us next week for Secretary of Defense and CIA Director Leon Panetta. Remember to turn in your pledges, call in, email, whatever. The station needs your support. John, any final words?
Dina, thank you, my sister. Another deadhead. I love you. I love your work. And I'm forwarding this interview with you to the MacArthur Foundation. Someday you should get the Genius Award that you deserve. Thank you.
Thank you all for tuning in. Rob?
Guys, disinformation. It's like worms in your eyes. You privileged bankers, you gambler thieves, you profit on war. You think it's just less money in peace. So that's how it's done. Time after time, country after country, and crime after crime. You pretend it's religion, like there's no one to blame for the dead and impoverished. In your little patriot game, honey, that's the war racket. That's the war racket. That's the war racket. That's the war racket. You got the world's greatest power, and you team up with thugs, make a fortune on weapons, destruction and drugs. But your flags and boots and uniforms, they start to all smell the same.